child abuse. This is Victoria. This is from the Amazon is where it's native, and it's now often grown as a horticultural, because horticultural interest, because there's these huge floating leaves. And you can actually put somebody on there. There are examples of larger people on there as well. Here's with baby and after baby. You can see the difference. And here's somebody actually seeing. You can just get the size of these leaves. They are ginormous, and many of you have seen them. But they do have these. Here are the flowers, also huge, but very similar to what I showed you in that last side. Tepals, this transition of parts, kind of an amazing thing. Okay, everybody good on water lilies? They really have no vessel elements, by the way, in their stems. I'll come back to that in a little bit. So we've now seen two things that really don't have true vessel elements, even though we always think in their leaves and stems, even though we like to think about it as a flowering plant feature. Good? All right, let's move on to this group, the Austrobaileales. There are actually a few families in the Austrobaileales. We're just going to focus on one, this family, the Iliciales. And this is what I passed around as earlier as the plant of the day. Everybody's got that? Some cool chemistry, but I don't say much about that. Now, these are both Florida natives. Here is the one that I passed around, and then we also have this other beautiful Illicium floridana, nice specific epithet, which is a Florida, maybe endemic to Florida, largely. It may spill over into Alabama, I can't remember. But you're seeing some of the key features here right away. Look at these flowers. This is in fruit. These are all carpels in this cool ring, which is one of the ways you can identify the family, actually. So let's do that. Let's jump right in and go over the Iliciaceae. You might want to call it the star anise family or the anise family. And we'll just go over some reproductive features. We see tepals again. How many times have we seen tepals now? Oh, every one of these. Think there's something going, a trend there? By the way, we are not, once we get out of some of these first few lectures, we're not going to see tepals very much anymore. So this is very clearly a feature of these basal lineages of flowering plants, to have tepals, where you really can't tell the sepals and petals apart, where you really think that distinct sepals and petals probably evolved later on in the Angiosperm evolution. And we also have numerous parts again. So when I talk about morosity, remember, a lot of these have there are a lot of parts. But that's going to change as well as we move through the flowering plants. We have a lot of cool, weird, evolutionary experiments here at the base of the flowering plants. And we have spiral arrangement again. That is going to change as we move out of some of these basal lineages. So these are things that, boom, right away are going to help you identify some of these. Sometimes the outer parts have a little bit of sepaloid character, but when you look at a flower up there, you can see that those are just all very bright and colorful. So we call them tepals. Stamens are numerous. The carpels are pretty much, there are a lot of them. It can be 7 to many, but those are in one whorl. So those are not spirally arranged, and they actually, the ovaries are superior, one girl. This whorl of carpels, once it goes into fruit, gives a very characteristic appearance. It actually makes this fruit of all these little carpels look like this, star-like structure. And that's why it's often called the star anise family. And let me show you what I mean, because this is a star anise, Illicium verum, which is from the Caribbean. But see all these follicles? Each one of these is a carpel. Now they're in fruit. There's the seeds, okay? And it gives a fragrant oil. It's used in cooking. It's used in perfumes, soaps, toothpaste, mouthwash, skin cream. Chances are you have used a member of the Iliciaceae and never knew it. Now, do not confuse. There's star anise, and that's what we're finding in the Iliciaceae. But then there's also anise. Star anise, anise. Anise is another common name, acceptable common name for another flowering plant that we'll see much later in the class, okay? But this is the star angiosperm. And you can get a sense of this fragrance that's characteristic of the Iliciaceae just by crushing the leaves of the plant that I'm sending around. That chemistry, that smell is pervasive throughout the family, all right? You can almost smell Illicium before you run into it. Chances are good you can smell it before you see it, once you get the sense of what it smells like, okay? Everybody good with that? So we've covered three families, the Amborelaceae, what's next? The water lilies, which are the Nymphaeaceae, and then this latest one, the Iliciaceae, which represents the Astrobiales. Everybody good with that? What have we seen? Common features. What have we seen a lot? Help me out here. What are some things that have been very frequent?
No vessel elements.
Yes, that's right. In Illicium, it's kind of in between. Where it's kind of, I'll say more about this in the next slide. Some people think they're true vessel elements. Some people think they're in between. But in water lilies and in Amborella, you're right. Yeah. So this is something I'll highlight on the next slide. What about let's talk about the perianth. Lots of tepals. These are good examples of tepals, yes. Instead of clear sepals and petals, we don't see that so much. What about morosity? Is it 3, 4s, 5s? Kind of all over. It's what we call indeterminate. Some of the water lilies are in 3s, by the way, but other than that, they're kind of variable. So no sepals and petals, we have tepals. Parts, at least in Amborella and Illicium, we have a lot of examples of spiral arrangement of parts. The water lilies can be whorled, but a lot of them examples of spiral arrangement of parts. We have these leaf-like stamens, right? We have laminar stamens in a lot of these. The parts are not fused. There's no fusion of parts in any of these things that we've really covered. Things that become typical of other flowering plants we don't see here. Okay? Everybody good with that? All right, so you're kind of getting a good taste. So here's why phylogeny matters. We think, this is great that you mentioned it, where did vessel elements evolve? Probably maybe right here. Although there is, some people think, well, these are not the best vessel elements in the world, but yeah, they're okay, they're vessel elements. They're kind of but so maybe here. And the other thing, remember, you think of carpels, this thing that encloses the ovule, as being this, nice fused developmental structure, but in these first lineages, it's really kind of glued shut. So remember how I said you want to think of it as almost like a leaf that's folded, and these first ones, it's really closed by glue. Some sort of mucilage holds that thing together. So these are all really good examples of why phylogeny helps us interpret the pathway, the course of evolution. Are we all right with that? Okay. This was not how people thought things evolved, by the way, before we had a good phylogeny. This kind of helped change the interpretation of how the first angiosperms might have looked. Okay, let's move on. So we've talked about those 3 basal lineages. Now we're going to go into the magnoliids. And then everything after that, whether they be eudicots or monocots, are all called mesangiosperms. Let's take a look at where we are on a tree. We've gone over Amborella, we've gone over Nymphaeales, we've gone over Astrobiales. I'm not going to cover this because it's small. We're now in the magnoliids, and then after that we have everything else. So here is where we are now, the magnoliids, the ones in blue. Lots of big names, but you don't have to remember them all. Yes?
I think the basal root went from being terrestrial to aquatic and then back to terrestrial.
Yeah, you're asking like the $1 million question. So people have wondered, are the first flowering plants aquatic? Are they terrestrial? Because you're exactly right. Terrestrial, aquatic, terrestrial, and then from all these other things are largely terrestrial. So the idea is, where did the first flowering plants evolve? I think a lot of people, because of that early evolution of clearly the aquatic habitat appeared very early on in angiosperm evolution, as you can see on this tree. And this, so this has been a debate. I think a lot of people like the idea that the first flowering plants are woody because, first of all, what is the sister group of flowering plants? Gymnosperms. Gymnosperms are all woody. And then most of these are woody, but I think the idea is probably aquatic habitat came along very quickly. It's a great question. I love that. And there have been debates in the literature. You know, so people have used clever titles like were the first angiosperms wet and wild or dark and disturbed, because all the Amborella and Elysium, they are understory trees and shrubs, and so some people thought maybe they lived in these, maybe they evolved as an understory plant, and that's how the angiosperms got their start. So it shows you how botanists, do they try to liven things up, right? Okay. Anyway, on to the, yes?
So I guess I just that was a great question, and I'll just echo that. But I guess one thing that maybe I'll just add to what you said is that we probably don't think that things went, that angiosperms in general went from terrestrial to woody to terrestrial, but that the aquatic habit just evolved along the water lily branch.
Right.
Rather than the combination of everything.
Right, yeah, that's a good point. It's not that we think that they were woody, then they all became aquatic, and then they became woody again. It's just that the first flowering plants were woody, and then we have this aquatic offshoot, whereas with the main branch, main part of the tree of staying woody. Okay, good point. Yeah, so that's the way to interpret that tree. All right, so let's look at the magnolias. You know a lot of these. All right, so we have really two big clades, these as one group, these as the other group, and 4 orders, the Magnoliales, Laurales, Piperales. Those are in red because I'm going to talk about them. The Canalales, although super cool, and in Florida, actually, I'm not going to talk about. So let's start with, we're going to go over one family here, here, and there. Okay, are you ready? Here we go. Let's go over the Magnolia family, and it was already a plant of the day, and you know a little bit about Magnolia. This is another lineage with a long fossil record, but today there are only 2 genera and a couple hundred species. They're mostly warm temperate. The big areas for magnolias are here in the southeastern United States, but particularly Eastern Asia. Lots in China and other parts of Asia. So let's go over some basic features. These are trees, some shrubs. The leaves are simple. Notice that none of these are highlighted. Okay. Now magnolias, if you get to know them, the family, can be readily recognized by a vegetative character, which I happen to, and you can practice this when you walk around campus. You know what a magnolia looks like probably. They have stipules. Other plants will have stipules, but what they do is they actually use the stipules to encase or enclose the bud to protect the new little leaves in the flowers. That's not what other flowering plants do. Other flowering plants have little bud scales, but not our magnolia. So if you look at these, this is like you imagine this like a clam, actually. You have 2 stipules. Stipules are modified leaves, by the way. They're just a pair of modified leaves, and they will encase every terminal branch. Take a look at the magnolia. Every one will have a pair of stipules. Sometimes they're nice and furry like this. These are so cool. Look at those little guys. Okay, pass those around. Everybody from now on, when you see that, those stipules enclosing the bud, those will fall off, by the way. That's why I say they're deciduous. They'll fall off. And they'll actually leave a scar. So if you look at these, you'll see all these little scars, these little circular scars that go around the stem. That's a characteristic of the family as well. Let's take a look at it here. Here it shows these stipules kind of falling apart, falling off at the end of the bud. Here's a flower. Here's a close-up of those stipules. And then they'll just, like a clam, pull apart, fall off. You never even know they were there except you know that they're there right now because you can see them before, this is before they open and fall off. So here it is, the stipules, and then the new leaves are forming inside there. Got it? A cool vegetative character. Let's look at the flower. The flowers are solitary. What do I mean by that? Just like in water lilies, there's just going to be one flower that makes up an inflorescence, not 2, 5, 10, 50, just one flower. That's it. The flowers have a lot of features. You probably can recognize the magnolia and have been for a long time. They're big. That's conspicuous. They are actinomorphic. Really everything we've seen so far has been. They're bisexual. Again, we have tepals. Is this getting to be like a trend down here in these early lineages? And they're spirally arranged on a long floral axis. Now sometimes they can be whorled and there's a little bit of differentiation as in the tulip tree. But a lot of times in magnolia we think it'd be spirally arranged long floral axis. Okay, numerous numerous stamens, spirally arranged, numerous carpels. They're all separate and they're in a spiral. Yes?
Is there a difference between inflorescence and nebulous?
And
Nebulous?
inflorescence is how the flowers are arranged. And the other word was nebulous, means just unclear, uncertain. Yeah, so here we're...
We use that for flower when we're talking about the features of the angiosperms. Oh, I see. Okay.
Oh, are we good? Okay, yeah. All right. So bottom line here, lots of parts, lots of numerously arranged, spirally arranged parts. So when I ask about the phyllotaxy, what is it? Trying to use our words here. Spiral, whorl. Spiral, whorl. That's phyllotaxy. What do we got here? Spiral. Let's see. When we talk about arrangement, merosity. What's the merosity here? Parts 4, 5, or 3s, or none of the above? None of the above. They're like numerous. So they're not in. There are just lots of them, numerous parts. Okay, then I've got some other features here that we really don't care about too much. But so here's a typical magnolia flower. Let's turn off the light so you can see it in all its beauty. Ooh, wow. For many years before phylogeny, when I took classes, it was a long time ago, we learned the magnolia as sort of the archetype of the first flower. Big, lots of parts, spirally arranged parts. But based on what you know now with phylogeny, this is not the case. We think the first flowers, like Amborella, were fairly small, and that's what also the fossil record shows. So this is not what the first flower probably looked like, although having lots of parts that were not fused and maybe spirally arranged, that could have been. Okay. Anyway, here's another magnolia. I should have brought in a magnolia fruit. These are lots and lots of carpels. Lots of carpels spirally arranged together, now going into fruit. That's what you see here. Now these little carpels are opening up, and these are the seeds, and they're very colorful. They have this red special covering on top of the seed coat, which makes them very cool looking and easy to recognize. Now this is the other genus in the magnolias, Illyriodendron, the tulip tree. Here you can see the outer tepals. You can't see, those are tepals, right? Lots of stamens. The stamens are even kind of a little leaf-like, sort of almost laminar-like. They're not so, you can see they're kind of flat looking. And then the central part are all these carpels. Lots of spirally arranged carpels. So some consistent trends here. And this is what Illyriodendron does in fruit. Each one of the carpels, these actually kind of are dispersed by wind, so it's a different kind of fruit than what the magnolia has. But anyway, that's tulip tree, which grows here natively. Magnolia and tulip tree are both here. You can see them right in campus. They're gorgeous plants. Maybe we'll bring in some Illyriodendron for you to see in lab next week, or even this week. Yes, was there a question?
Yeah, is there a term for having clustered carpels like that, like we had the Megastrobilus?
Yeah, so that's a great point. Is there a term for a close aggregation of carpels? If they're not fused, I don't know that there is a special term for them. If they become fused together, yes, you will see in the fruit lab There is a special term once they start aggregating and show some fusion. They'll call them like a multiple fruit. But when they're free, separate, not so much. That I can think of, yes, but maybe we need one. Yes?
That's a similar question I had. I just wanted to know what the whole fruit, the whole structure was for the magnolia.
Yes, it is very stroboloid looking, but I don't know that we have. It's one of those times when somebody has missed the chance for a term, but it does look very stroboloid, doesn't it? And and people really have keyed on that for the early flower, the fact that maybe the axis was more was spirally arranged parts, stuff that you've already seen in the course of other lineages of vascular plants, right? So people have keyed in on that. So you're hitting it great. I love this. You guys are asking like really higher level questions. Super. Okay, this is a cool story. You do not have to remember this family, the Myristicaceae, but it's getting that time. Think of nutmeg. How many people have, you've all heard of nutmeg, right? So this is the nutmeg family. It has a lot of other cool things in there, but I like to throw cool stories in there because people do not often realize that plants have changed history. And this is a plant that changed history. So this is like many of these other families that we've gone through. Think of the Alyssium I'm handing out, the Persea that's going around. These plants produce a lot of strong chemistry, and that is behind this fruit up there, which is the source of nutmeg. It actually is two spices in one. The seed is the source of nutmeg, but you see that little red stuff on the seed? It's a fleshy covering, and that's the source of mace. It's a second spice. So you think, well, so what? I go to the store, I get nutmeg, I use it to make my pumpkin pie or whatever, it's no big deal. But over a century ago, it was a big deal because nutmeg only occurred in one place. These islands, which I have here listed as the Banda Islands, and there were just this tiny little chain of islands here. And what you want to think of is oil. Nutmeg and mace were the oil of the day. So the British, the Portuguese, the Spanish fought over those islands as people fight over oil today. Because if you came back with a shipment of nutmeg and space, you were set for life. So just like this, I said, the smell of some of these plants I'm giving you is so strong. These islands were actually called the Spice Islands. Maybe you've heard that term. And the idea was that the smell was so strong, you could smell the Spice Islands before you got there. Okay, so the two final players for control of the Spice Islands came down to the English and the Dutch. The Dutch had most of the islands. The British had one, okay? The British, and they finally decided, let's have a peace treaty. We've been fighting for years over these, and they came up with a solution. The Dutch would trade some territory to the English for control of the island that the English retained. What did the English give up? What did the Dutch give up to the English so that the Dutch could have all of the Spice Islands and have a monopoly on the trade of nutmeg and spice? Who discovered New Amsterdam? Whenever you hear in your history books, who first colonized New York? Was it the English? No, it was the Dutch. Why did the Dutch give up control of what we know today is an immensely important part of real estate? Why did they do it? They would rather have the Spice Islands. That's how important nutmeg and mace were. So they traded away New Amsterdam, which became later known as New York, to the British, rather than continue to fight the British for control of one island. There was a whole book dedicated to the story that I just told you in a few minutes. You can't read it, but it's called Nathaniel's Nutmeg. It's the story of nutmeg, and it's an amazing true story. It should be a movie. Okay, now we finished the Magnoliales. I've got to, let's see, I have 2 families left, and I have like 1 minute. Yeah, well, let's go to the Laureales quickly, and then maybe the Piperales can be handled in lab. This is the Bay family, the Laurel family. It's the source of more chemistry. We have cinnamon, but more spices. We have cinnamon, bay. It's a pretty big group, over a couple of thousand species. Lots of these oils, what we call ethereal oils, give you these cool spices. These are woody plants. They have no stipules, but they have a cool little thing, these little dots that I'll tell you about. They're very aromatic. A pellucid dot is a little hole in the leaf. You can almost, it's not a true hole, it's just like a thin area. You can almost see through it. They'll mention this in lab. But the coolest thing about the Lauraceae, we have tepals. Parts are actually in 3, but I want to show you one characteristic, and then we'll call it quits, that you can always use to recognize this family. The anthers open by 2 little flaps that curl upward. So here is a stamen. See these 2 little flaps? These actually fold back like doors on a spaceship. There's not a slit. They just kind of fold back like little doors. This is the avocado family. Here's a drawing. These little flaps. If you see anthers that open by little flaps, there's only one other family that does this, and it's not the one you're going to run into, chances are. It is this family, the Lauraceae. Lots of cool chemistry. We have, this is the sassafras family, again because of the chemistry. Sassafras is in, here it is. This is what's used to flavor root beer. The original source of root beer was a member of the genus, that's in the eastern United States. It's the avocado family, it's the cinnamon family, the bay family, and there's cinnamon there, it's the bark of a tree from Asia. And I'll probably have the Piperales, maybe we'll cover that, and I'll just give you that in lab. Any questions? I think we're definitely out of time. Okay, thanks for coming. If attendance stays like this, we may be time for another quiz next time. Okay, thank you. Hi.